Hey folks, before jumping into this week's episode, I wanted to acknowledge the passing of comic book writer and editor Jim Shooter, who passed away after a long battle with cancer at the age of 73. Jim was synonymous for a lot of work over, especially at Marvel, as he was a longtime editor-in-chief and brought a lot out of the publisher that hadn't been done since Stan Lee stepped down from the role himself. He really brought the X-Men to the front line and into the limelight, but he will also be remembered for bringing us to Secret Wars and that event that he led, which brought the entire Marvel Universe into a big battle to save the world, and save the universe for that matter. But he will be missed. He is one of those icons that really left his mark on the comic book industry, even if some may not have agreed with it. But I've always had a wonderful time whenever I met with him and spoke with him, and just a wealth of history that will never be forgotten. And on behalf of everyone here at the Comic Bin podcast, I wish his family condolences and thoughts and prayers at the loss. Uh, Jim Shooter was 73. May you rest in peace. HeroesCon is finally over, so it's time for my final recap. And after that, an old friend stops by the show. It's time for another episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast.
It's time for the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. The podcast you look forward to for all of your news and reviews of the best comic books hitting stands. Whether it's DC, Batman, Wonder Woman, Marvel, Spider-Man, Image, Spawn, Saga, Boom, Once and Future, Power Rangers, or whatever book or publisher you follow. We cover them all here. This is the place for you. That's right. It's for everyone. This is the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. Let's get it.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I am your host, Theo. Got a good episode for you today. Gonna talk about my final day of HeroesCon 2025. It was that final Sunday before heading back home, which was an event all in itself. But yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that and what I saw on that last day and just an overall commentary on HeroesCon as a whole. You know, it is, for someone who is a comic book fan, this should be on your bucket list of events to attend. This is one of the last few comic events that is devoted almost exclusively to the comic book genre. And it is evident and reflective and reflected in everything that you see at the Charlotte Convention Center for that weekend, whether it's on the convention floor or even in the panels, where the panels are devoted to the comic book industry. But I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then after my recap, Joseph Illidge comes back on the show, and he and I have a conversation about Bloodletter. Bloodletter #1 is already on shelves from Image Comics and Todd McFarlane Productions. And so we talk a little bit about how that series came together with he and Tim Seeley on the writing duties. And then we also talk a little bit about the work that he's doing on Noir is the New Black. The second season, as they are calling it, on Kickstarter is going on right now. It has about a week or so left in the campaign, but we talk about the story that he is working on, that he wrote for Noir's The New Black. He's actually did some work prior to that, in the first volume, it wasn't much, but he did enough to get his name in the credits. But this time around, he is actually writing a story, and he actually wrote a story in the extended edition of that first volume of Noir's New Black. I wasn't able to read that because I actually backed the original version when it first came out several years ago. But it is out again with the second season. The second volume of Noir's New Black is slightly different than the first, whereas in the first you got a big thick anthology trade paperback of stories from various creators. This time around is only going to be 3 stories from 3 creators. And so we talk a little bit about what he's doing in Noir's The New Black with the Winterfields, which is the story he's doing. But after that, we'll just go ahead and close out and talk about what we're going to be doing next week. I have some things lined up as we are, again, in con season for me. Comic-Con Palooza is ongoing. I have a couple events that are coming on the radar in the month of July, including San Diego Comic-Con. I'll be heading out there at the end of the month, as always, for covering the event at the San Diego Convention Center. But other than that, let's just go on and let's just jump into our episode for this week. First, talking about my time at HeroesCon 2025. So, despite the delays at the airport, not getting home, missing out on work, having my CGM go out on me, not having my blood glucose meter with me, having to buy another one, thought I threw away the strips. Come to find out I didn't throw away the strips. The last day of HeroesCon 2025 was an absolute blast. And all of that craziness that happened on Sunday does not take away from the awesome time that I had there in Charlotte. So this was my first time covering HeroesCon for the website, but it was my second time attending. First time I attended maybe a year or so after the pandemic, and it was a blast. And it was as much of a blast, if not so more of a blast for me this time around. Primarily because I had the time to not only walk the floor and buy comics, but just from the conversations that I had with the many guests that were there this year. And I said it in the pre-intro or in the intro, HeroesCon is the preeminent and probably one of the last few, and I'm thinking the only other one that has a heavy influence on the comic book industry, probably being Baltimore Comic Con. But HeroesCon is one of the last and probably the best event that is solely devoted to the comic book industry. I mean, you walk onto the show floor and from wall to wall, there are comic book vendors. And all due credit to those folks at Heroes Aren't Hard to Find to be able to put on that level of a show every year and just do an awesome job. They've been doing it for over 40 years, and that's an awesome feat. But just you go into the show floor, and from wall to wall, there are just vendors upon vendors selling comic books. And that's not to say you won't find other vendors selling other items and merchandise, such as t-shirts and Funko figures and other items. But just the number of vendors there doing strictly comic books is just absolutely awesome. But I also just again spent a good bit of time just talking to a bunch of the creators that were on the floor. doing autographs, taking pictures, selling items, and just talking about a whole bunch of stuff. I think I spoke with Stephanie Williams every day of the event that I was there, and she was quite a busy woman. She was there all 3 days, and every day she was doing a panel or another. I was able to sit in on the panel she was doing with regards to uh, disability and disability representation in the comic book industry, not just from the character standpoint, but also from the creative standpoint. And that was a very interesting topic. But I definitely wanted to sit in on it, considering uh, they just announced the first ever diabetic hero. Me being a type 1 diabetic, that really caught my attention. But just listening to that conversation was quite interesting. But I also took part in listening to some of the other panels, and I didn't do that my first time at HeroesCon. And they do an awesome job in filling out that schedule for the entire weekend with the focus strictly on comic books and the comic book industry, whether it's how comics translate to other forms of media. There was a panel strictly on comic book podcasting. It was a wonderful experience to sit there and to listen from colleagues in the industry talking about what they do and just all other aspects of comic books. I really wish that the publishers would devote some time to HeroesCon. You know, I would not consider HeroesCon to be a local event, although of course they do have a lot of local folks that are attending. But while there, I spoke to a lot of folks who come from other parts of the country to take part of the event. And you know, yes, there is an investment when publishers attend Comic Cons and other types of conventions, but for fans of comic books, publishers should remember this is their bread and butter. And with HeroesCon being one of the last few events that is devoted directly and specifically to the comic book industry, I would hope that the publishers, even the smaller publishers, could devote some time and some effort in going and participating in the events at HeroesCon. It'll be a great way of reaching their fans, again, who are specific to comic books. And just, you know, again, understand, yeah, it's a month away from San Diego, and, there's so much planning that goes into that. But there could be a little bit of effort to attend an event that is specific to what you do. And I think fans would really appreciate that. I know I would, as a fan of comic books. But again, for any of you who have not attended HeroesCon yet, that should be something that is on your bucket list, as a fan of comic books, simply because it's just that good. It is really devoted to everything comic books. I It was so busy that weekend that they sold out of the t-shirts that was designed for 2025. They actually had to go and pull out older t-shirts from previous years to sell. That's how busy it was. Even on Sunday, usually when I walk the floor of a con on a Sunday, it's light. There are folks that are there, but for the most part, you will find the vendors. They're packing up, getting ready to go. You'll see a few stragglers, at the table and at the booths. You'll see some of the creator tables that are empty. But that wasn't the case, that Sunday when I made my way into the convention center. And it was quite busy, So there are fans who really enjoy what the folks at HeroesCon do on a yearly basis. And again, like I said, I truly hope that the publishers take notice and invest a little bit more in what goes on there, and make a presence. I think it'll be great as far as reaching out to their bread and butter fans of comic books. But I want to thank the folks at Heroes Aren't Hard to Find and HeroesCon for allowing me to cover the event. I truly appreciate it. I hope to do it again next year. It's one of those shows that you can go every year, and it can be a different experience each time. And like I said, this was my second time going, first time covering it for the website, and I truly enjoyed it. Absolutely loved it. But that's my time there at HeroesCon. Again, if you've never been there, you ought to make an effort in doing so. It's one of those things that you need to experience if you are a fan of comic books. It's a great event, and I want to thank those folks out there in Charlotte for allowing me to cover it. But with that being said, let's go on and get into my interview with comic book writer Joseph Illidge as we talk about Bloodletter and Bloodletter #1, which is out on shelves right now, as well as the Kickstarter campaign for Noir is the New Black Season 2, in which he's writing one of the 3 stories in this particular issue. Is focusing on the Winterfields. So here it is, my interview with writer Joseph Illidge, and I will see you all on the other side. Hey, it's Theo, and I am sitting here with Joseph Illidge. Joseph, welcome back to the Comic Bin Podcast. How are you, my friend? Nice to see you again.
Pretty good. Nice to be back, Theo. Thanks for having me.
So we are here to talk about Bloodletter. And first of all, if you all have not read issue #1 yet, first of all, what's wrong with you? But 2, you may want to go ahead and stop and pause and go pick it up and read it, because we're going to talk a little bit about some of the spoilers in this issue. It's already out on shelves everywhere from Image Comics and Todd McFarlane Productions, as it is a part of the Spawn universe. So in Bloodletter, we are introduced. This is so over the past few years, Todd McFarlane has really expanded the Spawn universe. I mean, we've gotten these different variations of Spawn, but we've also come out as of late with different characters. So my reintroduction to Spawn was actually reading Rat City and from Erica Schultz. And so it's again a different take where Spawn's energy was just exploded across, and it landed on one person who picked up some of Spawn's power. And this universe is just really expanded, and now we see it expanded even more so with Bloodletter. And in Bloodletter, it's a little bit different because we're introduced to someone who has a particular grudge with our favorite dead man hero. We're introduced to Tasha Thornwall, and she has a grudge because Spawn, before he became Spawn, killed her. He was sent on a mission. She was an agent in the CIA, and of course he was an agent as well, but he was sent on a mission to take her out because she kind of went beyond the scope of what she was supposed to be doing. So you're writing this story with Tim Seeley. How did the two of you get together for Bloodletter?
So we've known each other for a few years, but Tim Seeley and I really became good friends while we both worked at Heavy Metal Magazine. So we both worked in editorial there. And during that time, we realized that we had similar modes of thinking when it came to stories and what we liked and ideas and approach. So we said we should work together on some projects. And so when Thomas Healy, who's the editor-in-chief of Todd McFarlane Productions, presented Tim and I with the opportunity to pitch for the Spawn universe, because as you pointed out, there was the one title Spawn for a long time. And then a few years ago, Spawn's Universe was an event. I believe there was a one-shot called Spawn Universe, and then the spin-off titles came out, and they were ranging from Gunslinger Spawn to the Scorched. And so getting the opportunity to work in that universe was really about finding something that the Spawn universe did not have, but that would fit in well to like its ecosystem. And so Tim and I both love espionage, right? I'm a big spy genre fan. You probably got an indication of that from how I handled the character Sanction and the Secret Society of the Shadow Cabinet in the Milestone Shadow Cabinet series I wrote for DC Comics. Tim wrote Nightwing, and then he wrote the spin-off series from Nightwing called Grayson, in which Dick Grayson became a secret agent for an organization called Spiral, right? So we both love espionage, and then both of us are into horror, but to different degrees. Tim is the co-creator of Revival, the Image comic, which has just been adapted as a sci-fi series, and then Hack Slash, and I believe he's written Hellblazer as well. For me, one of my favorite films, horror films forever and ever, is The Descent. I go back to the old school days. I still feel like The Exorcist will always be one of the best horror films ever created in cinema. And so that's what the Spawn universe is. It's this juncture point of horror and espionage. And so we brought those things together, and we wanted to somehow make this connected to Spawn, give it a personal angle. So we came up with the character of Tasha Thornwall, who was a CIA agent back in the pre-Spawn days when Al Simmons was the Sum of All Fears CIA agent. He was the guy you sent in to basically lay waste and solve problems decisively. So he was basically the John Wick of the CIA, and he worked for Jason Wynn. And so basically Tasha Thornwall was part of a group called Incision. Incision was a division of the CIA that basically helped build underdeveloped nations by protecting them from conspiracy or protecting them from coups. And what happened was their assignment was to protect a candidate who was going to become the next president of Haiti. And that was their mission. And so Tasha had been undercover for some time. In time, she fell in love with the guy. They developed a romantic relationship. And then at a certain point, the CIA changed their mind. And they were like, you know what? We want his competitor to win. And his competitor had initiated a coup to take him out. And Tasha and her group was like, no, we didn't protect this guy for a year to then just give him up to the wolves. So they were going to get him out and protect him. And Al Simmons came in there like the enforcer, and he wiped her whole team out. And he would have wiped her out too, but she made a move that got her out of there just in time. So she escaped. And what Al Simmons then did is he did a scorched earth maneuver on her. You may remember a past CIA agent named Valerie Plame, who was outed by then Vice President Dick Cheney during the George Bush presidential era. And so basically that's what Al Simmons did. He outed Tasha Thornwall to the entirety of Haiti, and specifically by name as an undercover CIA operative. So her cover was blown, which meant that she was in immediate danger. And so she had to go way underground and basically pretend that she was dead and never stick her head out. And so she's been walking through the shadows and the dark alleys and the secret corners of the Spawn universe for 10 years. And the Spawn universe is full of angels, demons, malebolgia, magic of all kinds. So she had to learn magic to survive.
She's picking all this up as she's in the woods.
it was no choice. It was a no choice situation. And so now we're 10 years later in the here and now, and in Spawn 294, I believe it was, Al Simmons revealed to the world on television and all the cable channels and all the streaming, all the social media platforms, that he was alive because he was a military hero thought to be dead. He's alive, he's Spawn, and he's here to save the souls of humanity. And when Tasha finds that out, she loses it, because that's a trigger for her. So you think about someone who has been through a traumatic event and what a trigger would be like, and it triggered her. And so now,
it gives her a mission.
Well, basically, it becomes the obsession now, right? Because Al Simmons is basically her boogeyman. That's her nemesis. The effect of what he did to her, she can't separate from herself, and it has changed her profoundly. And so knowing that he's alive, now all she wants to do is erase him from the earth, right? And now that she's a mystic, she can go up against Spawn. So that's what's going on here.
And so she's not a hero from this standpoint, because again, for her right now, it's about getting the tools in place to go after and to take out Al Simmons.
Correct.
And she's doing some pretty horrific stuff to get this done. I mean, there's one scene where she basically saved these people from this demon early in the issue, only to turn them over to this exploiter, simply to get more tools into her own briefcase that she could use in this new obsession to go after Spawn. So we see from the beginning that at some point that's going to happen. She's going to get to him. How deep is this mission you and Tim are going to take us on?
Well, I mean, for her emotionally, Tasha has lived a life that has forced her to be able to go by her own rules. She was a person who was a patriot. She worked for the government. The government betrayed her. And so now she is no longer showing allegiance to any institution other than the institution of self. The only way that she's going to survive is to survive by her own wits and the acquisition of more knowledge and more power, right? So the scene that you're talking about, she wanted to acquire an artifact that would increase her mystical power, right? And so she, as you said, saves a group of captives who were being sold to a demon from hell. So she saves them from that demon to give them over to the traffickers, because the person who runs the group of traffickers has the artifact, right? So that was a case where she saved them from a more terrible fate, but she still leaves them to a bad fate. So right there, you're seeing someone who does not have obvious morals, right? There is a compass.
Yeah.
But the compass is very slim, and you don't find out about the compass until the end. And we won't exactly say what the end is, but again, the moment where she finds out Al Simmons is alive is a trigger. That's a trigger moment. And if you think about us as humans, there are certain moments where you can think a series of thoughts rapid fast in like 2-3 seconds, right? She has a moment like that, and the moment like that changes the direction of her entire life. Okay, so it is interesting because she's not immediately heroic, right? And from her point of view, in finding out that Al Simmons is alive as Spawn. Al Simmons is the villain in her story. That's just a fact. So him being Spawn, that's irrelevant to her. That's not the context in which she sees him. She sees him in the context of the origin of her trauma.
Yeah, it's like she's not even hearing what he's saying on TV right now. It's just she sees that face and that's it.
And that's it. That's right. Then she mentally goes into the red. First she goes into the black, and then she goes into the red. Right.
So when putting the series together, how do you and Tim work on the plot to know, okay, I'm gonna take this particular arc, you're gonna take this particular plot line. How have you all plotted out these 5 issues?
So, there's an arc, there's a story arc, there's a character arc to what's happening with Tasha in her mission to kill Spawn, and she and Spawn are going to mix it up, and there's going to be an aftermath of that. And so the 5 issues is an arc. And so what we do is we separate the tasks issue by issue. So basically one person will do the first take on a plot, very general plot, like 2-3 pages, right? Then the second person will put like notes on that to amp it up, to beef up certain things, to make sure that the thematic through line is clear, right? And then the originator will then massage that a little bit, and that is the plot off of which the script will be written. And then the plot originator will write draft 1 of the script. The other writer will write draft 2 of the script. And then draft 2 of the script is the one that's sent to the editor. And we went back and forth issue by issue in that regard. Okay.
And I assume you all flip flop who does draft 1, draft 2. It's just to get
100%. Issue by issue, we pass the baton back and forth.
Gotcha. So when putting all that together, the art from Christian Rosado, I hope I'm saying that last name correctly.
Yes.
How did that introduction come about? And because the art, I mean, it really fits everything that you would expect from a Spawn story. I mean, the colors and the pencils, it's just heavy, and it fits that mold of being a dark horror story like you intend for it to be. So how was that introduction? How did Christian come into the project?
So, before I even get into that, let's not even, mince words. Christian's artwork is awesome, and we're blessed to have him illustrating this book. The colors by DC Alonso, absolutely amazing. The way they both came to the book actually goes back to Heavy Metal, because when I was executive editor of Heavy Metal, I really developed a friendship with Luis Arambaru. Luis Arambaru is the owner of the Buzzito Agency, which is one of the best creative agencies in comics worldwide. And when I was editing Tarna, Christian did Act 2 of the Tarna series, which was issues 3 and 4. And then DC Alonso colored a variety of different things for Heavy Metal that I was working on, including, I'm trying to think, Sun Eater, which was a fantasy horror series that was created by television and film star Dylan Sprouse, right? And so when this opportunity came up with Bloodletter, I said to Thomas Healy, the editor-in-chief, I said, listen, I think I can get the right people for this book. And he said, okay, show me what you have. I went to Luis. I said, is Christian available? Is DC Alonso available? And he said, yes. And we sent their samples in, and that was it. And it wasn't even samples. It's not like they did pages, sample pages of Bloodletter. It was basically just showing work that Christian and DC Alonso had done, over the past few years. And Christian's most visible work was Vampirella with Christopher Priest. And I believe DC Alonso's most visible work was Avengers from Marvel Comics. And so when Thomas Healy saw their work, that was it. Then we were off to the races, because Tim and I actually wrote 3 Bloodletter scripts before we got Christian and DC on board. So once they were on board and Christian visualized Tasha, then it all became clear, right? It's one thing to story-wise, intellectually, in the mind's eye, know your character, but when you see that character visualized, it takes on a whole new dimension. And like any sensible writer in comics will tell you, that artists make them better writers and make them look better, because part of what you're doing is you are writing to the level of your artist. And so once Christian came on board, that was it, man. Then it was perfection. And like you said, his stuff is really evocative of the mood of the Spawn universe. Spawn universe has a very particular mood, right? And DC Alonso and I really worked together to come up with, well, what's the palette of this universe, right? And so one of the things that was important is that Tasha's trench coat be reddish, right? Why is it reddish? Because it's a visual connector to Spawn. Spawn's red is a very specific and iconic red. And Tasha and Spawn have a shared history. So visually, we wanted to be able to tell you there's some connection between these two. So both of them are in the darkness operating, and Spawn has a red cape and Tasha has a red trench coat, which when she's in movement, like if she's coming at you from the sky, because she's a runner, so she is an expert in parkour, right? Which is basically the whole sport of running up and down buildings and urban settings and just moving and defying gravity. So when she comes at you, that trench coat is flapping like a cape. And you might actually think that's Spawn dropping out of the sky for you, right? So that's really how it happened. And all of us working together to make these stories, we're very thoughtful about each issue as a team. And then And World Design is doing the lettering. And we have variant covers coming up by Raymond Gay, who did variant covers for Bloodletter 2 and 3, which are amazing. And then Mirko Kolak is coming on for a variant cover of issue 4, because Bloodletter 4 has just been solicited.
So let me ask this, and I should have asked you this first. How did you all settle on the name Bloodletter? Because again, I hear Bloodletter, I'm thinking Warhammer. Right. That's where I remember it from. So how did you all settle on that name?
It was really Tim that came up with the name Bloodletter, because he was at, I think, like an old antique shop or bookshop, and he saw that as part of the title of a book. Okay. And he just felt, okay, that just sounded perfect. And again, John Constantine Hellblazer is one of the North Stars for Bloodletter. So just the whole 3-syllable thing, Hellblazer, Bloodletter, it's just perfection. And then I came up with the name Tasha Thornwall. Number one, I like the alliteration of names that goes back to Stan Lee, right? Peter Parker, Bruce Banner, Reed Richards, right? And so I like that. I feel like that's something that is easy for people to remember. And Thornwall is for a very particular reason. If you read issue 1, Tasha's narrative is having a conversation with someone about God and the devil, right? And when you think about Jesus Christ, you think about the crown of thorns, right? So I was like, okay, Thornwall, right? So that's how, that's how we do these things. That's how we come up with these things, right? Names are not just names. Names mean things, right? And so that's how those came about.
Man, so yeah, so again, I've been out of the Spawn universe for a while, and I read Spawn Universe where the spinoffs all began, and then I got
Yes.
into Rat City when that came out, and then big fan of yours, and so when I hear about Bloodletter, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be in on this, and then you read it, and you was like, wow, this is a real deep story, because again, she's not a hero, although she does a few things that may be considered heroic, but in the end, she's going to be like this big anti-hero. She's going to do whatever it is that's going to be meaningful to her to accomplish her mission. And right now, her mission is going to be getting to Al Simmons.
Yeah, and it's interesting because so you're talking about the Spawn universe. The Spawn universe is different from other universes, whether it's a DC universe, the Marvel universe, in a variety of ways. And one of which is it really operates in the moral grays, right? Which in a number of ways, I think is similar to life, right? I think Todd created a universe, Todd and all the creators he's amassed over the years for the Spawn Empire created a universe that in terms of humanity, human behavior is pretty similar to the real world, where like absolute good, absolute evil, these are not easy things to come by. Most people are in between these things. Yeah. And so that's where Tasha resides. She resides in between those two poles, especially as someone who was good and then suffered for being good. I mean, almost got killed for being good, right? And then she's going through the world, and you don't know what she's been through these 10 years. And those 10 years are basically the secret history of the Spawn universe. So as Tasha takes on her mission to wipe Spawn off the face of the earth and the universe, you're going to see these flashbacks within the Spawn universe where she was and how it connects. And there are some major connections, right? And so it's easy to categorize her as an anti-hero. I would say that's the easiest categorization. What I feel like Tim and I have set up with this series is that issue by issue, your definition of her will change. Issue by issue, you'll be like, am I with this? Maybe I'm with this. Okay, I see where Tasha's coming from here. Ooh, how do I feel about that? Right? And that's part of it, right? Because when you're talking about revenge takes on its own priority that supersedes general ethics, right? There's only revenge, and then after the revenge, you can get back to the luxury of ethics.
Right.
During it,
it's just that.
They're an impediment. Ethics are an impediment to revenge. Okay? So, yeah, we're in for it here.
And let me just say, one of the things that I also appreciated about Bloodletter, and it's the same thing with regards to when I was reading Rat City, is you don't necessarily have to be entrenched in the Spawn universe to know where it is. I mean, we know immediately we're in the Spawn universe because within the first few pages, he has Al Simmons pinned to the ground. And then we kind of get a backstory as to why she wants Al Simmons pinned to the ground. So you don't necessarily have to go back and read Spawn Universe or anything prior to then, because you're going to get those bits and pieces of the backstory to help you, and you kind of confirmed it over issues 2 through 5. You're going to get even more. And so, for any of you who haven't read it because you may be afraid, well, I'm not all that versed in things Spawn, I might be lost. You're not, because you're going to get the bits and pieces you need to follow the story. And I'm just going to tell you, I'm jealous because I see those Batman volumes behind you. You better hope I never find out where you live.
Yeah.
I'm coming for them.
Okay, that's fine. I will put them in a box for you. So that's Batman No Man's Land. Those are the 2 omnibuses. And you know that that's one of my editorial pride and joys, getting to work on Batman No Man's Land. But of course, then over here we have the Spawn compendiums, all 6 of them, because listen, when Tim and I got the gig, I went to one of my local shops, Bulletproof Comics, and he had all 6 of them. I said, I'll take them all, because you got to do the work, right?
Yeah.
And now listen, I was there when Image Comics started. I bought Spawn #1 off the racks at the comic book shop.
So
Spawn #1, Youngblood #1, Wildcats #1, Wetworks #1. I bought them. I was there when Image Comics changed comics forever. And so I have been
Savage Dragon.
Listen,
I was there for them all.
So I've been in and out of the Spawn universe. Sometimes art would bring me back. Sometimes I would hear about a particular story. There was a run that Jason Sean Alexander, who's a friend of mine, he did the art. And Spawn was no longer about panels. It was basically like each page was an illustration, like a montage, taking you through the origin of Spawn or the history of somebody else or the evolution of the story. Those issues really intrigue me, really hard to find right now from what I understand. But it was really important for us, me and Tim, to create a story that could be an entry point for new readers. Honestly, I feel like that's the responsibility of every writer in comics. You know, we're not in a time where people want to jump into the absolute unknown, where they don't want to have a sense of how things work. So it has to be inviting to them. Bloodletter #1 is that. It's a great entryway into the Spawn universe. Now, for the Spawn fans, it has a whole other meaning. And so the beginning of the issue, like you said, we see Spawn in jeopardy and we're introduced to Bloodletter. That is the present.
Right.
And so the series is basically taking you to the past and how it's going to bring you back to that moment for the battle between those two. And it was important to start the story that way. And this was, you know, on Tim, is because, you know, something that I have learned over the years is, and an old supervisor told me this, on any given Wednesday, there are between 100 and 200 new comics against that wall. Now, there are a number of us, we walk in the store, we know the majority of what we're going to get. We'll have it on a pull list, so our retailer just gets our bag or pulls the things out of our folder. We may still want to discover something new, but comic book stores invite a lot of walk-ins, and that's an opportunity for new customers. So people are going to see all these covers. Yours has to stick out among all that visual noise. Then, if you are fortunate enough that they go to your book because of that cover, they're only going to open it and flip through it like twice. They're going to open it, they're going to see page 1, they're going to open it again, they're going to see page 2 and 3. And that's it, in or out, right? And so the first issue beginning had to be compelling. That had to be something that said to you, okay, if I'm a Spawn Universe fan, that's my boy on the ground there. What's going on here? And if I'm not a Spawn Universe fan, whoa, this is a mean introduction scene. What's going on here? And of course, the art is exquisite, right? So if you know art, if you know what you like, you look at that and you know that is talent. You know that it's moody, it's visceral. I feel like you even get the sense that it's a revenge story. It's certainly not a love story, right? And so that's the thing, right? You have to capture people immediately and then keep them there, right? And that's part of the process. That's part of what we're working towards. We're working towards getting your attention for those few seconds and then earning your attention for the ride.
Man, well, I am definitely just on issue 1. I am ready to finish this ride over the next 4 issues since issue number 1 is out. Again, it is Bloodletter number 1. Issue number 1 is on shelves. If you haven't picked it up yet, please do so. It is an awesome read. You do not need to be a vet of the Spawn universe in order to enjoy the story. It'll give you all the bits and pieces that you need to catch you up to where you need to be. But before we close out, there's one last thing I do want to discuss, and
Yes.
that is the Winterfields.
Yes.
So plenty years ago, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 years ago, FairSquare Comics, and they've changed their name since then.
Yes.
But they came out with a Kickstarter campaign called Noir is the New Black. And it was an anthology of stories completely drawn and written by Black creators.
Right.
And it introduced me to a lot of creators who I personally was not familiar with. They're now out with a new season, a new volume, and it's kind of slimmed down. It's a little bit different than before, where it was a thick anthology for that first volume. But now we got season 2, and with season 2, we're just doing a few stories. It's still an anthology format, but it's just fewer stories. And Joseph is going to be writing one this time. He's actually going to be continuing a story he began in the extended volume of Noir is the New Black, which I didn't get because it wasn't offered in the campaign. Thank you, Fabrice Sapolsky. But the campaign for volume 2 of Noir is the New Black, and it's titled Noir is the New Black again, is currently going on Kickstarter. I am proud to say that I was a day 1 backer on the campaign. When it hit the internet, when I got that email from Kickstarter saying that it was live on Juneteenth, I made sure that I went out there before I got on my plane to Charlotte for HeroesCon to back it, and made sure I let Fabrice know, hey, day 1 backer right here. But for those who were not able to read that intro story to Winterfields in the extended version of Noir is the New Black, what is Winterfields?
So the Winterfields is a Harlem Renaissance father and son story, and it's about Kane Winterfield, an ex-World War I soldier and bodyguard, and his son Carver Winterfield. Carver is about 12 years old. And basically they're bodyguards, and we're talking about during the Harlem Renaissance. So in Noir is the New Black expanded edition, which came out in 2024, we had a 6-page story right at the front of the book, which showed you the end of an assignment gone sideways for the Winterfields and how they got out of it, right? And that story took place in 1927. This new story, which appears in Noir is the New Black season 2, issue 1, because there's going to be a series of issues. So the Winterfields comes back as the lead story, and this is taking place in 1925. And the reason for that is because this year is the 100th anniversary of the essay The New Negro by Elaine Locke, which a number of historians consider the kickoff, the activation of the Harlem Renaissance. So we are living in the 100th anniversary of the Harlem Renaissance. So we wanted to commemorate that with a story celebrating the Harlem Renaissance in all its beauty and all its mystery and all its crime. And the Winterfields is a great way to do that. It's, you know, Chris and I really love the idea of doing a father and son story. There are not a lot of father and son stories in comics. I can't immediately think of one. There aren't a lot. And so doing that is important, and doing this period piece celebrating Black life, Black culture, which is American culture, is important. And FairSquare Graphics is really the perfect publisher to do it, because the company owned by Fabrice Sapolsky and Crystal Adams Sapolsky and Ethan Sapolsky, that is an independent publisher that is dedicated to unique creative visions. They are dedicated to publishing, right? And publishing is really complicated right now. What's happening with the comic book industry because of the end of the distribution monopoly and everything that has come as a part of that, because of things like tariffs and how that affects printing and shipping from outside of the United States. For a variety of reasons, being a publisher in direct market comics is a harder proposition now than it was 1 year ago. But FairSquare Graphics is a company that is committed to publishing. They are committed to creators. They've been a great home for the Winterfields. And so with this Kickstarter campaign, they're taking the Noir is the New Black idea, which I think is their best-selling book in the publisher's history, and now doing it as a series of issues. There's going to be 3 stories. The Winterfields is by myself and Chris Cross. There's the Little Rock Files by Greg Burnham and Quinn McGowan. And then there's No Face, I believe it's called, by heralded director, filmmaker Ernest Dickerson. You're talking Juice, you're talking The Wire, and co-writer Rose Geddes. And so these 3 stories will appear throughout all of the issues. The campaign is going right now. Noir is the New Black, season 2, episode 1 is what I believe it's called. And so for Chris and I to bring the Winterfields back during the 100th anniversary of the Harlem Renaissance, this is a kind of story that I feel like will give you those feels like when you saw Sinners and you just saw these powerful Black people of agency in this early 20th century story that really had some character depth and some cultural depth. So that's what we're doing with this, and we're really excited about it.
All right, so you have and how far are you guys on with those other issues? Have y'all pretty far ahead with them?
Oh, listen, I mean, basically what's happening is, the books are going to be done throughout the year. So we're making sure to stay on the schedule that FairSquare Graphics needs us to be on, because all 3 issues are coming out this year, as this year is the 100th anniversary of the Harlem Renaissance.
Gotcha. Well, like I said, the campaign is going on right now on Kickstarter. Again, I'm proud to say I am a day 1 backer. I can't wait to, and I backed it to get the digital issue so I can start reading it before the printed issue comes in. Because again, as you mentioned, for a lot of the independent publishers, a lot of times they were dealing with, getting their books printed in China and having them shipped over. And now with the way of the world today, a lot of that has changed. And, not everyone is a DC, Marvel, or Image, who could quickly move from Diamond and quickly jump to Luna or whoever. There's a whole bunch of logistics and a whole bunch of that has to be discussed. And so I remember Marcus Williams was doing his Popeye series over at Massive Comics. And
yes,
I mean, I interviewed him on issue 3, I believe, and issue 4 just came out last month. And now, we're still waiting on getting the final issue out. So independent publishers, don't have all of the avenues. So I do my best to support them the best way I can. Kickstarter has been an avenue for a lot of, and we've seen how they're doing it. FairSquare, they go out there and they do campaigns before things get to the direct market. We see Boom has done it. We see AWA has done it with the Illuminati.
That's it. The big companies have descended onto crowdfunding And what that has done is that makes it harder for the independent publishers, because
Yep.
the bigger publishers are eating up a
They're
bunch
crowding
of
the market.
oxygen in the room, which
Yep.
means the independent publishers who were there from jump, they need your support even more. And just to tell it to you real, I have donated to the Noir is the New Black Season 2 Episode 1 campaign, because there's a $50 level where you get a special holofoil cover by Ken Lashley. And if you've seen it, this thing is exquisite. Now, we just talked about the economic realities of independent publishing. It's not a DC Comics where because you write an issue, you're going to get all the different covers. It costs money to make those things. So I don't have the immediate expectation that because I'm a writer on this series, I'm going to get all the covers. I understand that those things cost money, so I'm paying $50 for that book. And that's the thing. We have to be willing to do the things that we ask of others. So I donated to the campaign, and I'm one of the creators. So that's how much I feel about it, and that's how much I feel about FairSquare Graphics.
Yeah.
And my fellow creators.
Yeah, I've been a big fan of those guys from day one. Again, Noir is the New Black kicked it off, and then they followed it up with Mutiny. And I've asked Fabrice about Mutiny coming back, him and Crystal bringing Mutiny back. You know,
That's right.
we've seen
Mutiny Black Girl Magic.
Yeah, but you know, I was a huge fan of the magazine because it allowed you to have, again, different stories by different creators who I may not have had exposure to, simply because of the roadblocks it is for independent creators to get out there. And you know, when spots like Kickstarter and Indiegogo popped up, it really spawned a place for them to go. So much so, the bigger publishers are taking notice too. And yeah, like you said, you got to support them no matter what. So as soon as Fabrice said, yeah, Noir's New Black is coming back, I'm on it day one, you know, because it's a product with the series that I believe in and love. And FairSquare as a publisher in the books that it produces, it brought back Watson and Holmes, you know, that Holmes and Watson that I really dug. And so when you see that stuff, you really want to invest in publishers like that. And, you know, again, I'm a big fan of Greg Burnham, been a fan of his, you know, and Marcus since Tuskegee Air. So when they did Little Rock Files, hey, I'm backing that.
That's right.
You know, because you want to back those folks that you enjoy and you want to see successful, you know, because I remember speaking to Greg once, and you know, he had done time at the Milestone Initiative a few years ago. He did a story in the anthology, but in the end, he loved doing indie comics because of the freedom it allows him to do. So you want to support those guys, and I do it every chance I get.
Thank you so much. It's absolutely important that we support the publishers who are doing the kind of work that we believe in, because you know, independent creators, entrepreneurship, these things are, I would say, necessary. I think we are now in a moment in time in the world where entrepreneurship is demanded, where innovation is demanded, where creator-owned ideas are demanded. And so it behooves us to support the publishers that are facilitating that.
Well, they definitely have my support whenever I see those projects come up. Like I said, day one, I was there. Joseph Illidge, thank you so much. So, as always, and I know you did it for the first time, but you can't get away with it again. It is time for rapid fire. I promise I'm going to make it a little bit easier this time, because I especially on that last one with
oh my goodness, I remember that last one. Oh, that was hard. That was hard
because again, we kind of had the same thought process with especially with Justice League Unlimited. So this is going to be a little bit easier. Let me know when you're ready.
God bless you. Okay, let's go.
All right. Sentry or Superman?
Superman.
All right. Daredevil or Spidey?
Spidey.
Okay. Wonder Woman or Black Widow?
Wonder Woman.
This might be easy.
Okay.
Batman or Nighthawk?
Batman.
Okay. See, that one looks kind of confusing because the original Nighthawk was white, but then when you get into the new universe, he's black, and it's a little bit different for me. So I'm kind of on the fence.
I mean, listen, I love both those characters. Batman is Batman, and the Nighthawk, that version that was created by J. Michael Straczynski and Gary Frank for Supreme Power, which was then really reimagined and crystallized by David Walker and Ramon Villalobos and colorist Tamara Bonvillain. I mean, that was an amazing 6-issue series with those Dennis Cowan covers. Come on.
And I don't want to get too far, but let me tell you, I was so upset when they took Supreme Power off of the Max line, because it was such a real story. I mean,
Supreme Power was great.
Hardcore, just boom, boom, boom. Yeah, you had your cussing and everything going on, but man, it was a story that could
was brilliant work.
Yeah, It was great work. All right. Last one.
Okay.
Thanos or Darkseid?
There you go again with the hard final questions. Oh man, that's a hard one. I'm going to say Darkseid. And that's a real hard one. And I'm saying Darkseid from the context of comic books.
Okay.
I'm not talking MCU versus Zack Snyder's Justice League.
No.
I'm talking as a comic book reader of 5 decades and knowing what Darkseid has been and what Thanos has been. Darkseid's on a whole other level, man. A whole, like, Thanos loves death. Darkseid is.
Darkseid
is. Yes. That's the sentence. 2 words, period. You understand?
Yeah. So I take it
so much more. Yeah.
I have been so enjoying what DC's been doing with the Absolute Universe and how they're gonna bring Darkseid back. I mean, I am afraid we're gonna see a Darkseid that we never could have imagined when he makes his return. And
listen, go ahead.
No, I'm just excited for it because, again, as a reader, you know, always in the end, Darkseid is, but Darkseid's gonna lose. I could see a story coming out because of the Absolute Universe where Darkseid not only wins, he wins convincingly. And I'm just anticipating such a great return when he comes back.
Well, yeah, they're really setting up something big with, like you said, the Absolute Universe, the Omega Legion, and the return of Darkseid. But now think about this, right? When you're talking about Darkseid, there are certain portrayals of Darkseid which just go to another level. Paul Levitz and Keith Giffen for the Great Darkness War in the Legion of Superheroes. The fact that Darkseid made it to the 30th century, right? When you're talking the John Byrne run of New Gods, when you're talking Walt Simonson's Orion, you know, when you're talking about Final Crisis by Grant Morrison and J.G. Jones, you're talking Grant Morrison's Justice League with Howard Porter, which is, you know, the origin of Darkseid is. And so Darkseid is forever. That's the frightening thing. When Darkseid loses, it's temporary. Darkseid is forever, just as certain elemental forces are forever, and the same way that energy is neither created nor destroyed, it's transferred, right? So Darkseid is, and that's it, right? So that's the thing. That's the thing about that character, right? He's potent on a whole other level that that goes like places where Thanos doesn't go. And that's all respect to Jim Starlin, who's a genius, and Thanos is a character in Marvel's pantheon that has gone through a variety of approaches. Kieron Gillen just did some great work with his series, The Eternals, and his exploration of Thanos. But for me, it's Darkseid, man.
Oh yeah. Again, Darkseid is. Joseph Illidge, thank you so much. How can fans keep up with what you're doing? And how can they follow you on social media?
Great. And thank you again for having me. So you can find me on Facebook as Joe Illidge, Blue Sky as Joseph Illidge, Twitter, Joseph P. Illidge, LinkedIn, Joseph Philip Illidge, Instagram, Illmaster1, and TikTok, Joseph Illidge. Yeah. Oh, and I just started Threads because a good friend of mine posted something which he only posted on Threads, so I had to start Threads. So I am on Threads as Joseph P. Illidge.
So I will have those links in the show notes. Joseph Illidge, thank you again so much for joining me here on the Comic Ben Comic Book Podcast. I can't wait to do it again. I will see you in San Diego. I will be bringing my copy of Bloodletter #1 so I can get your signature on it as well to go along with Tim Seeley's sketch that he did of Tasha for me. So I'll see you in July.
Looking forward to it.
Same here. Talk to you later.
Okay.
So again, I want to thank Joseph Illidge for joining me on the show. It is always a fun time when he comes on and we're able to talk. You guys just don't know, while you could hear the interview as it is, we probably do a good 10 to 20 minutes of talking pre and post recording. That is just the wealth of information and knowledge that is in his head is just awe-inspiring when talking about comics in the comic industry, with his background not only as a writer but also as an editor and working with creators from across the board with writing comic books and editing comic books. But again, Bloodletter, the latest addition to the Spawn universe, is out on shelves already. Issue #1 was really good, and I say that as someone who has not been as well versed in the Spawn universe as others. Again, I jumped back in reading Rat City, and so this is the second book that I picked up that's in this new Spawn universe. So it is out on shelves from Image Comics and Todd McFarlane Productions. Also, Noir is the New Black. Season 2, the campaign is going on right now. We have, as of this recording, we have just over a week left, and is about $2,000 short of meeting its goal. I believe the goal was about $10,000. But again, I'm looking to up my campaign contribution to make sure that it meets its goal. I'll have a link in the show notes. Please give it your support if you can. If there's one thing I have always loved, and I said it in the interview, the folks at FairSquare has done an awesome job in putting creators in the mainstream that you may not have heard of before, and I truly appreciate what they do and in getting those names and those faces out there. But yes, I will have the link to the campaign in the show notes. Again, if you can back it, please do so. It is a great story. It is a great anthology. You can also get some add-ons, which includes the first volume of Noir's The New Black. That was an awesome read. It introduced me to so many creators that I was unaware of before I picked up that book. But yes, if you can support it, please do so. And I assure you that you would enjoy reading Noir's The New Black Season 2. But that is going to do it for this episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. Next time I am going to try to get the folks over at GalaxyCon to come on the show to talk about their event that's going to be going on in New Orleans in a couple of weeks. And it's their first foray into the New Orleans area over at the Montreal Convention Center. I will be there covering that weekend as well as a part of the Comic-Con Palooza that I do on a yearly basis. But I hope to have some of the folks from GalaxyCon on the show to talk about what brought them to New Orleans and what fans can expect what fans who will be attending can expect from this year's GalaxyCon, their first year in New Orleans. I was looking at the guest list today, and just 2 weeks out, they're still adding comic book creators to it. So you will not see me complain about that. I'm also working on getting Cullen Bunn back on the show to talk about where things are with Gotcha Man over at Mad Cave Studios. As you know, they just had the 10th issue, which was a shocking conclusion when you see the number of dead bodies that were laid all over the place. And it seemed like Galactor really laid the wood to the folks over at the International Science Organization and the Science Ninja team itself. So I'm going to work on getting Cullen Bunn back on the show so we can talk about Gotcha Man as well as the future of Gotcha Man and his place in it. But I'm hoping to do that in the coming weeks as well. And then, of course, I am preparing for the trip out west to San Diego for San Diego Comic-Con. Again, if you guys are in the area, I will be as well, and I'll be carrying lanyards and possibly a few t-shirts. So of course you can stop me if you can and get you one or the other, if not both. But that is going to do it for this episode, the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. As always, I thank you all for your support, and I will see you next time. But as always, until then, keep reading those comics. That is going to do it for this episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I'd like to thank you all for your continued support of the program. The Comic Bin Podcast, as well as the Comic Book Spot, are a part of the Comic Book Source family of sites and media. You can follow the podcast on Twitter X at comic_bin, or my personal account at BatmanFan_4life. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. We're all over social media. You can also follow our sister site over at thebatmanuniverse.net for all of your news and reviews in the world of Batman. Tune in next time as we give you more in the world of comic books. Again, we truly appreciate your support. But until we meet again next time, keep reading those comics.